This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. This episode of the show is sponsored by Bayer Strategic Consulting in Washington, D.C., which helps scientists get funding, gain influence, and build strategic relationships with the stakeholders who matter most in their professional world. Reaching those goals often involves effective translation of complicated research into engaging, jargon-free communication that boils down complex topics to capture the attention of decision makers and general audiences. Interested in getting a free resource to help you do just that? Go to complexitymadeclear.com to get the 11 keys for translating complexity. That's complexitymadeclear.com to get your free infographic used by science communicators and others at major organizations to boil down but never dumb down complicated science and technical topics for key stakeholders. I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Katherine Sugarman to the show today. Katie is a physician with more than 25 years of patient care and executive pharmaceutical experience in oncology, clinical development, global regulatory affairs, and global medical affairs as well. She has a passion for accelerating and delivering innovative and meaningful new treatment options to patients with unmet needs. Katie also is a diversity and inclusion advocate, a community volunteer, nonprofit board member, a special needs caregiver, and mother of 2 boys. Katie earned her MD at Duke University in general surgery and her undergraduate degree from Harvard University. Welcome to the show, Katie. It's wonderful to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here.
Good. Thanks. I've been focused a lot on this show recently about effective transitions, and they can be challenging to navigate. So many of us are making different transitions professionally, for example, and you are, from your firsthand experience, you have made significant transitions from very high level positions and also all throughout your career that you don't necessarily see every day as you're looking at somebody's LinkedIn. And so I would love for you first to chat about, this is like the road less traveled, like how to navigate career transitions. You could just give us a sort of background or a curtain raiser on this.
Sure. One of my favorite quotes is the Gilda Radner quote, and I know you and I chatted about this when we first met, but the quote from her is, "Life is about not knowing, having to change, taking the moment and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen next. Delicious ambiguity."
Hmm.
And I love that quote. I actually have it on a magnet on my mirror in my bathroom. And I didn't always think that ambiguity was delicious. I was a very high-strung high school student who studied all the time and was focused on my grades and making sure that I didn't fail. That was my number one goal. And so the first right-hand turn that I took off the path was in college when I suddenly realized that I wasn't as good at organic chemistry as I had hoped. And I really wrestled with this challenge of who am I? What do I want to be when I grow up? And I ended up changing my major to psychology, which was a fantastic switch for me because it gave me an opportunity to think more about human behavior, understanding myself, understanding the world around me. And I always joke that I wrote all my papers about my roommates. I've had these experiences in life where I am suddenly faced with a situation that is entirely out of my control. And it really challenges me to take another look at what's important to me, understand who I am, and learn more about myself as I learn to navigate through that challenge and discover strengths that I didn't know that I have, as well as to give myself a new set of choices that I can make in which I have an opportunity to learn more about what fulfilling my purpose really is all about and to make choices based on what my gut instincts are telling me.
Yeah, it's so much in that response that is incredibly both insightful and valuable for people, because when in the middle of this hurricane, thinking about your career and you're a high achiever, and then of course you have wrapped up in your self-identity that you're a high achiever and that you're going to be a doctor, for example, in your situation, and then all of that suddenly shifts, and it can really be incredibly unsettling. So how to deal with that is just gold for so many listeners and so many of us who have faced similar situations. And so you had mentioned when we chatted before that you had taken a semester off and that gave you some perspective.
I did.
And yeah, can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it was in college when I really was backed into a deep dark hole when I was trying to still get all my A's in my courses and just became miserable. And so I took a semester off from college with the support of my family and my academic advisors. And I ended up going on this Outward Bounds type trip for 3 weeks called Ultimate Challenge in Yosemite. And we didn't have any form of communication, no watches, no compasses. We backpacked everything in and out on our backs. And I learned to trust in myself and the people around me and navigate an entirely new set of unexpected challenges and opportunity to dig deep. And that's when I changed my major. It's the first time I really stopped and decided that it was worth me changing my mind, changing my decision, the factors that influence my decisions, giving myself permission to switch gears. And I do a lot of career mentoring with people. One of the things I do is I say, I'm entirely empowered to give you permission to do things. And I can give you permission to take naps. I can give you permission to look at new job opportunities. I can permit you to say no because it's free, but just give yourselves permission to say, okay, I'm being driven by something that dictates that I have to stick with what I originally said I was going to commit to, and I'm unhappy doing that. Who's really forcing me to stay in that situation? And can I give myself permission to consider that there might be something else out there that could be more fulfilling, in which I would be happier?
Yes.
And not fear failure just because I'm changing my mind. It doesn't mean that I've failed at something. It means I've chosen to do something
Right. And
different.
you also mentioned in your first response to that question about listening to your gut. And
Yeah.
that's fascinating to me. Of course, more recently we've seen research out about microbiome and is there a brain gut connection? I know there's a lot of research ongoing, some that's been published. And it's always funny to me when come across a cliche, listen to your gut, and then centuries later,
The science is
there's a reason for that.
finally laid out in
Yeah.
front of you.
Yeah, please talk
Yeah.
about that.
I think I told you I created this by accident came up with this approach to how I make some of my most difficult decisions. And one is a very backwards way looking at it, which is what would I regret most not having tried? And it's like that quote, what would you do if you didn't believe that you could fail? But what would I regret most not having tried? And that to me illuminates what I am afraid of not being good enough at, or what I'd really be excited about, but it's way out of my comfort zone. The second test I take myself through, which is also a trust your gut exercise, is you have two friends. You have a friend on your left shoulder and a friend on your right shoulder. And you're looking at, say, two major options in life. Do I want to go to medical school or do I want to join the Peace Corps? And you put one friend on your left shoulder and say, Katie, I really care about you. I know you so well. And I think you're driven to become a physician. And I really think you should apply to medical school. And you've got another friend on your right shoulder that says, Katie, I care about you. I know you extremely well. You have a passion for helping people. And I think applying to the Peace Corps is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think you should do that. And honestly, just the question I ask myself is, do I lean more right or left? And whatever direction I'm leaning is not because the friend has better advice or because they know me better, because there's a right choice. It's not a binary world. But whatever direction I'm leaning in is really what my gut's telling me to do. It is the thing that I connect with more
Yeah.
completely.
I said there was a lot in your first response that I wanted to tease out because there really is. And the last thing here that really struck me was how you raised this issue of consistency. As someone who's a persuasion nerd, I'm fascinated by what moves people. Consistency is a way we're wired. We want to be consistent. And there's a whole literature on the impacts of that and so forth. So we're inclined to be consistent. So we start getting down this path and there's this pull of stay the course. And I think being sensitive to that kind of, predilection, how you want to describe it, proclivity to be consistent that our sort of minds want us to do that can help maybe inoculate ourselves a little bit to, I just have to tough it out and keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. So in the theme of trusting your gut and the two friend test, I actually had that happen to me recently. So you and I talked about how I recently resigned from my job in big pharma and started my own consulting company. And I'm actually now interviewing for a job in a different type of a pharmaceutical company. But I was wrestling with this question of, do I stay here and complete my time and through to retirement, or do I try something different? And so I talked to a friend of mine who's a very accomplished lawyer. She works extremely hard. And she said, how much longer do you have until you retire? I said, 5 years. And I'm thinking 5 years is a lifetime. And she goes, oh, 5 years. That's just right around the corner. You should stick it out for another 5 years, get that full retirement. And I remember being on the phone with her and just thinking, ugh, like, God, that is not what I wanted you to say. And then a couple hours later, I went to go get a massage, and my massage therapist said, so how are you doing today, Katie? And I said, I'm in a weird state of mind. I think I might quit my job. And she said, oh my gosh, you should totally do it. And I remember thinking I just wanted to hug her. She is, I don't even know who this person is, and she's giving me advice. And the consistency thing, sometimes it's that you get advice from people who are in the same position and they're telling you what they're comfortable with. And so you have to really be careful with who do you let give you advice? Because sometimes people are really just giving you advice to justify their own decisions, and it has nothing to do
Sure.
with you. So you got to choose your mentors
Yeah. And
carefully.
that gut feeling that you mentioned too. I want to build on from this point. You talk about how do you make decisions then? And maybe some of the questions that you ask yourselves or exercises that you put yourself through your sort of thought process.
I think it was about a year and a half ago, I came upon this free webinar that was led by Jay Shetty, who wrote Think Like a Monk. And I have not read his book yet, but I've been back online looking up some things, some shorter YouTube videos with Jay in it, and some other terms like ikigai, which is a Japanese term for kind of a four-circle Venn diagram of the different parts of your life and your existence and the ways in which you can feel fulfilled. And the equation that he uses is that your purpose is comprised of three things: your passion, your compassion, and your expertise. So I feel passionate about wanting to help patients living with cancer. And I have compassion for patients who are newly diagnosed with advanced metastatic cancer, for their caregivers, their family members, and wanting to do something to help them feel like they have hope. And maybe it's just hope that they could get some type of response by joining a clinical trial or something, because my medical training and my pharmaceutical industry experience. And that's just an example of how, with that equation, I can use that to help guide me and say, okay, what are evaluating, and how do they fulfill those three main components of my purpose? And there's enough to just put it in a nutshell. It's like you have three piles of work in front of you. One pile of work is the pile that you love. One pile is the pile you hate, and one pile is the pile in the middle that enables you to do what you love. And so how do you shift your distribution of your daily time, or the responsibilities that you have at work, or the way in which you gravitate towards different roles within your profession, by trying to shed more of that end pile that you don't really understand, that there's a certain amount that you have to do to enable the work that you love, and see if you can create a situation that evolves into being more of what you love, and a greater proportion of time during the day working with people that you enjoy working with and doing the things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, so important. And what you said about, even if you're in a current role, like you were saying, what activities or types of interactions do you gravitate towards in your current role? I think that is such an important thing to think about, because that obviously points you to things that you like doing. I've heard the one about go to a bookstore when we used to have those, and see in which section of the bookstore you're spending the most time. And again, it's like this idea of do and the passion. Where does my passion lie? You referenced this scary career change, so to speak, that you have just recently made, and
Yeah.
giving listeners a window into that. And you've talked already about the different um, ways of thinking and resources and things like that to consult that you use as you're thinking about making a change. But perhaps you could talk about this latest change, and I think we'll see some of the analysis or thought process reflected in it.
Yeah. I found myself at a point in my career in big pharma looking at the whole length of time that I had spent with a wonderful company that had given me a whole myriad of different opportunities to take on different roles, as you read in my bio, with clinical development, regulatory affairs, medical affairs, business strategy, and other things. And I really appreciated every component of my career journey with this company. And even more so, the fact that this company, prior to COVID, helped me create a flexible work arrangement because I have a younger son with significant health issues and supported me through that in a way that allowed for me to have flexibility working from home or sometimes even working from the hospital if I needed to while he was in the hospital. And to build trust and accountability in a different way from what the traditional model was of having your butt in a seat at a desk Monday through Friday. And I had really appreciated all of that. And then I got to the point where I thought, wow, I love doing all these different things. I love building teams. I love mentoring younger women or who are earlier in their career. I love doing a lot of diversity and inclusion work, in particular advocating for employees with disabilities and caregivers, because that is my role now for my son. And I really wanted to do a little bit of all that stuff. And I couldn't figure out how to fit it into one job that was traditionally defined in the setting of Fortune 100 company. And in order to be able to do all those different things, I started to think about different ways of doing it. And I finally decided to give myself some credit for the fact that I had built this expertise over the period of the last 20 years between medical training and industry experience, and that I could offer that to people. And that depending on what individuals needed, I might give them more of one piece of that or another, whether it's build out a medical organization to help launch a new product, pioneer an asset in a sort of fast track development strategy to get it approved for patients with high unmet need, or counsel an organization on how to build out employee support programs for caregivers who now there's so many more of us than we realized
Mhm.
3 years ago before COVID. And we're carrying those responsibilities, and we need to find ways to be able to continue to take care of ourselves and our loved ones and also still continue to earn an income and garner insurance, healthcare insurance, and other types of benefits. So I decided to leave and start my own consulting company. And I didn't really have a completely well thought out plan. And so I talked to a friend of mine about a week after I submitted my letter of resignation. I said, I'm freaking out. I don't have a job. And she said, you did go about it somewhat differently from how most people would do this. And most people would have a plan before they quit. But she said, but here you are. So now you just got to figure it out. Stop hiding under your covers, get out of bed and do something about it. And it was a Sunday morning. So I got up and I made my coffee and I was like, okay, I'll make a plan. And like you said, consistency, structure, we all benefit from a certain amount of that. And I'm realizing that now I don't do well not having anything to do during the day. I really do enjoy some structure. It gave me an opportunity to stretch and think about how do I define myself outside of these, you know, four walls that I've created for myself or the glass ceiling, whatever else, and start thinking about new creative ways to define myself and what I have to offer.
Yes, and I'll be interested to hear what where that leads you as you look into the future. I think as we wrap up, advice that you have been at the highest levels in the corporate world, your academic training obviously as well, and you've had some deep personal experiences that have definitely shaped your passion, and also this kind of firsthand experience. Like, sometimes think about it as credibility. Like, when you demonstrate what you're doing or what you're talking about, it comes from deep personal experience in that dimension of your life. And I wonder, as folks are maybe contemplating big changes in their life, transitions maybe from academia to big pharma or to a startup, or whether they should do that PhD, or whether they should switch jobs because they're finding that they're gravitating towards certain things that they love in their current role, and they actually want those things to be a bigger circle in their life. I love the model that you shared also. So just thinking about the advice that you would give someone who's facing those kind of alternatives or options, I should say.
Yeah. And usually that ends up being advice that I would have given myself back then when I was struggling so much more to make some of these decisions and in reflection that I really should have been struggling. But that's the first thing is keep it simple. And I've been in situations where I'm so driven by the shoulds. And one of my college roommates said should is the worst word in the dictionary. And it really is because it means you're judging yourself by someone else's standards. And people don't follow you for the rest of your life. So be careful of who governs your decisions. But I remember 2 years ago, I got asked to look at an opportunity in biotech, and it would have been a high risk, high reward opportunity to just build a regulatory team and get a drug approved. And I had decided that year, 2021, was going to be my year of 3 priorities. The first one was my health and well being, and the second 2 priorities were my 2 boys. And that was it. And if anything threatened the stability and commitment and health of those 3 priorities, then my answer was going to be no. And I gave myself permission to say no starting January 1. And so I said no to that opportunity. I felt a real sense of relief. And I actually explained to the CEO that was the basis for my decision. And it just simplified what I was wrestling with. It just took that burden off my shoulders. The second piece of advice I would give is if things feel difficult, try to get a little more sleep.
That should be a
And that is advice I got from a counselor once, and I was catastrophizing and I was failing at everything and I was nowhere where I should have been. And I just kept judging myself harshly. And she said, "Can I make one suggestion? I think you just need a little bit more sleep." And she said, "I can't promise that everything will resolve and suddenly magically become exactly what you want, but I promise you it should get a little easier." And so I try to give people that recommendation too. Don't shortchange yourself. And then I try not to be fatalistic about things, but life is short. And one of the things having my 2 children has taught me is that you can never get that time back. And not that you should live so carpe diem that you're dropping everything all the time to have that last moment if it's your last. But I do feel like when I've made decisions to set something academic or productive aside because a family member needs something, leaving my surgical training for a week because my grandfather was dying, I never regretted that decision looking back. Saying no to a career because I would have to travel more than I could afford to because of my 2 children that needed me at home. I don't regret those decisions. And I know in some of those cases, people come back to me and say, "Well, are you sure that wasn't an issue of setting your own glass ceiling or imposter syndrome or whatever?" And you do have to wrestle with that, but don't overthink it too much. If you really feel better about making a decision, you feel more at peace with a decision, it's just okay to make that decision. You don't have to apologize to anybody for missing out on some theoretical professional opportunity. You do need to make the decision that's best for you and the people you.
Wow, so great. Really important. And I know that listeners are going to take a lot away from this. They'll be able to apply in their own experience. I think one of the themes that came up throughout as a thread throughout our discussion was listening to your gut to make these kind of decisions. We could deny it for a while and we want to stay consistent and so forth. The other thing you mentioned about sleep, we hear so much about the need for additional sleep. And I hear that too. And I got about 5 hours last night. The thing that really struck it for me, and it's reflected in what you said, is get more sleep. It will change the way you experience the day. And I
Yeah.
really have thought about that a lot. And it's so true.
Yeah.
It is so true because so much of these negative thoughts, and when we are just in a bad state because we haven't gotten enough rest, it's much easier for us to be negative, I think, more generally. And so we can,
Or just too
yeah,
close to the edge. That last straw breaks so easily, so early in the day if you cut yourself that short. I will tell you, my son is a freshman in high school. And he just took his first AP exam last week, and he was studying really hard the week beforehand. And the night before the test, he kept saying, "I just want to study a little more." And I said, "Gus, let me tell you something. If you stay up late to read that last paragraph or to study that last YouTube video or whatever, You may do a little bit better on that one question. But if you get a good night's sleep and you have a healthy breakfast in the morning, your whole performance on the entire test, all those questions, will be incrementally improved because you're well rested. And so that's the decision you're making. I'll let you make the decision, but that's the trade-off decision that you're making. So he did go to bed early.
Great, great. Oh, such wonderful conversation, Katie. Thanks
Yeah, thank you.
thanks for sharing it with me and with our listeners around the world, and wishing you a really wonderful next chapter in your professional and personal life.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for taking time out of your day to include this in your life, and I hope you will be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe. Check us out on the web at whensciencespeaks.com, and we'll see you next time.